Hello guys, so today we'll be talking about monopoly. So for monopoly, first of all, remember the characteristic that we've mentioned before. First, monopoly, there's many buyers and there's only one seller. Monopoly is a price maker. Monopoly, in a monopoly market, there's high barriers of entry, meaning no firms can enter or exit the industry easily, and there's no close substitute in the monopoly. Like for example, Tenaga National, you cannot find another energy supplying firm in the nation easily. Okay, so these are the characteristics. Make sure you guys remember this. Okay, so first of all, we'll be talking about the revenue curve of a monopoly. The marginal revenue curve of a monopoly is downward sloping. The reason for this is because monopolies are price maker. Price maker. They make their own price. Okay. So a price maker for this case monopoly, they can either control price or quantity. They cannot control both, because if they can control both, then they'll make unlimited profit and it's not realistic in the real world. So they can either control price or quantity. What this means is if they want to increase the price, they need to reduce the quantity. They need to reduce supply. Or if they want to reduce the price and increase the quantity, they need to do it. If they want to reduce the price, they need to increase the quantity and so forth. Okay, and because the marginal revenue is downward sloping, the average revenue is also downward sloping. Okay, so this is the very important thing about monopoly. Next, okay, the next thing that we need to know is that total revenue is maximum when marginal revenue is equals to zero. Okay, why? Because it's actually very common sense, because as we know, marginal revenue is the change in total revenue when the quantity increases. Okay, so when the marginal revenue is positive, what this means is that the change in total revenue is positive, so it will keep on increasing as the quantity increases. Okay, until the point where marginal revenue equals to zero, and when marginal revenue becomes negative, it will start to decrease. And that's why when MR equals to zero, this is the maximum point. That's the first thing. Second thing is that we can actually determine the PED of the demand curve using the MR and also total revenue, marginal revenue and total revenue. And before that, you need to know demand is actually equals to average revenue, which is also equals to the price of the curve. Okay. Now next is that how do we determine the PED using TR and MR? For that, we need to remember what we've learned from AS. What is price elasticity of demand? So price elasticity of demand is when it's just the percentage change in quantity over the percentage change in price. So when price elasticity of demand is more than 1, what this means is that the percentage change in quantity is more than the percentage change in price. Okay, so let's say in this case, in the monopoly case, we know that the price of the monopoly keeps on decreasing. So when the price of the monopoly keeps on decreasing, the quantity demanded will increase. But when one factor is increasing, the second factor is decreasing, and total revenue is P times Q, what happens to the total revenue? The answer is that total revenue increases or decreases depending on the price elasticity demand of the good. If the good is elastic, if the good is elastic, meaning if the good is the PED is more than 1, then the change in quantity is more than change in price. The percentage change in quantity is more than the percentage change in price. So Q increases more than the decrease in P, which makes the total revenue increase. And this is actually this part of the curve. When P decreases, total revenue increases. and this part of the demand curve is elastic. Okay, and and you can use the same explanation to explain the bottom part when it's elastic. When P decreases, total revenue decreases. Next is same as the previous perfect competition. The firm of a monopoly maximizes its profit when marginal revenue equals to marginal cost, which is this point: marginal revenue equals to marginal cost, and you produce at you draw up a line to the demand or the average revenue, and you produce there. Next, we'll talk about barriers of entry. So we've mentioned that in a monopoly, there's actually a high barrier of entry. So what is actually preventing the new firms from coming into the industry? One reason may be capital costs. So what capital cost means is that the cost that is required as a capital to set up a factory or to set up a company. Well, normally monopolies are actually very big company, which means that in order to compete with them, you will need a lot of money to set up your machineries and stuff. And new firms normally do not have that much money, so they cannot enter the market that easily. Next is economics of scale. So large firms, when a firm is a monopoly, they are a large firm. Normally, they already experience economics of scale. When they experience economies of scale, this means that they are producing at a very low cost compared to a new firm that are coming into the industry. The new firms are unlikely to get economies of scale so quickly. That's why they will produce at a higher cost compared to the large firm. Okay, and that's why large firm can actually sell at a lower price, and the new firms, when they come in, they cannot compete with that low price, and they will lose out to the large firm. Okay, second explanation or second analysis of economy of scale is that some industry can only sustain one firm. We call this a natural monopoly. One example is like a post office, a postal service. Postal service is actually a business which has not a very high profit of margin. You need a high economies of scale in order for a firm to earn money. So for that case, for postal service, you can only sustain one firm in the industry, and you cannot sustain 2, 3, or even 4 firms. And that's why our post laju our post Malaysia post postal service is the sort of the monopoly in the nation. Third is legal barriers. Large firms normally they have copyrighted their products. For example, Apple, they sue people for doing products that are similar to them, and that is sort of a barrier for small firms, because when a small firm want to enter industry, some of the products has already been patented, and they may not have the right to actually produce the good. Fourth is brand loyalty. Okay, so imagine now you were to start a Google search engine. Sorry, not a Google search engine. You were to start a search engine. You name it, I don't know, Yaggle, Yagle, Yaggle. Okay, when you launch a search engine, even though if you do a lot of marketing, it's still very hard for you to win consumers from the bigger companies such as Google and Yahoo. Okay, and this is the case when a firm is entering an industry. When you are entering a new industry where there is a monopoly, the monopoly is already in the industry for so long, and they have already a lot of loyal customers. So when you go into the industry with your new product, you cannot convince the customer to switch over to your product, and that is one barrier which firms may face. Number 5 is ownership of factor of production. Well, if a very big monopoly controls some of the vital inputs, they can actually deter it from new firms. Some large monopoly actually starts to do vertical merging or vertical acquisition to obtain businesses from their previous production line. For example, Starbucks, the previous production line is coffee beans. Not coffee bean as in coffee bean the company, but coffee beans. So big monopolies, sometimes they already control the factors of production required to produce the goods, and this can be a problem for new firms when they come in. Number six is aggressive tactics. Because new firms are more established and they already have a profit, they're already earning profit, like monopoly, they're already earning a lot of profit. This is actually a barrier for new firms, because when new firms are coming in, they can actually do a lot of discounts or even cut down the price below the cost to deter the firms and kick the firms out of the industry. So these are the six barriers of entry which are um, quite quite easy to understand. But of course, there are still others barriers of entry which you can write or you can use during the exam. Now we'll talk about the short run equilibrium of a monopoly. So for short run equilibrium, there's actually three types or three scenarios. Before that, we remember that firm monopoly will produce where MR equals to MC to maximize profit, right? So the three scenarios are when the monopoly when they are producing at MR equals to MC, whether or not the average revenue is larger than average cost, equals to it, or smaller than it. This is similar to when it's in perfect competition. So when the monopoly is producing MR equals MC, when AR, average revenue, is larger than average cost, we call this supernormal profit. When it's equals, we call this normal profit. When AR is less than AC, we call this subnormal profit. So this is supernormal profit. AR is larger than AC. Normal profit. AR is equals to AC, and subnormal profit where AR is less than AC. Okay, in the long run, however, there's no subnormal profit equilibrium, because when the monopoly is making subnormal profit, the monopoly will leave the market, because making subnormal profit means that the monopoly is making a loss with its time and its money. Hence, in the long run, in the monopoly market, there's only normal profit and supernormal profit. Okay, and since there's barrier of entry, even though the monopoly is making supernormal profit, it can continue to make supernormal profit indefinitely. Okay, this is different from the case of a perfect competition, where a firm making a supernormal profit will attract new firms to enter the industry and thus corroding or eroding their profit and making the profit to normal profit. Where in a monopoly, the supernormal profit can continue indefinitely. However, even though the monopoly is producing at a subnormal profit, they may choose to continue their operation due to some reasons. But this is not a long run equilibrium. This is not a long run equilibrium. Equilibrium is only normal profit and supernormal profit. This is just a special circumstances. So next we'll be talking about price discrimination. So what is price discrimination? Price discrimination is when a firm sell a same product to different consumer at different price, or the firm sell the same product at different time at different price. One example which I believe every one of us here do know is when you go to a cinema, you can see that there's student price, there's adult price, there's children price, and this is one type of price discrimination where firms sell the same product, the ticket, to different consumers at different price. When a monopoly is practicing price discrimination, what is happening is that the monopoly is trying to capture the consumer surplus in addition to its original producer surplus. Let's say that the price original the average price, not average price, the equilibrium price is B. Okay, however, there are certain consumers which are willing to pay at price E. So when the monopoly charges the price at price E for this consumer, the monopoly captures this portion of consumer surplus and make it their producer surplus. And this goes on the same to other types of consumer. I mean other points of the curve. However, there's a conditions for price discrimination. First of all, this is not the accurate, but the textbook says so. The firm must be a monopoly. If you notice, there's actually oligopoly that are practicing price discrimination also. But for the sake of this video, we will just take it to be true. Number one, firm must be a monopoly. And number two, the market can be segmented. For example, the market of a theater or a cinema can be differentiated into adults, children, or students. Number three, the elasticity of demand is different for each market. The demand for movie for a student is actually higher. I mean, the elasticity of demand for a student is actually more elastic because they have lower income compared to adults. So this is what I mean by elasticity of demand is different. Number four, the cost of separating the market is minimum. Meaning, if you want to charge different price to different consumer, if you need to use a lot of money to do so, then it is not worth it. Like for example, in a theater, if if I mean you can charge the consumer, or you can separate the market by just asking the students to show their student card, or students to show their or for children to show their IC, which is practically costless. Number five, there must be not any government regulations preventing you from doing so. There are some countries which prevents certain companies or certain industry from practicing price discrimination. They say that this is not fair to the market or to the consumer. There's three types of price discrimination, which is first degree, second degree, and third degree. So for first degree price discrimination, the seller or the monopoly charges each consumer the maximum price that they are willing and able to pay. One example is a taxi. For first degree price discrimination, taxi, which the taxi driver, they charge the tourists. Some of the taxis charged by using meter, but some charged by just giving a random price, and they will try to maximize the price that they charge for each consumer. Another example is in Pasar Malam, for example, Petaling Street, Pasar Malam, Chee Chong Gai. The monopoly also, not the monopoly, the stall owners also charge the high charge price to the consumer as and try to negotiate the highest price possible. The second type of price discrimination is when the consumer charge the same consumer different price at different time. One very prominent example is in a pub, for example, the library pub, where there's happy hour, and when you visit the pub or you buy beers at that time, you get a cheaper price. Or even at Inti College, for Inti College, if you, for example, there's the package where if you pay your if you pay your fees, your semester fees late, you get charged a penalty, and or if you pay the whole one whole year, you'll get a discount. This is also one type of second degree price discrimination. Thirdly is McDonald's. McDonald's, there is the package for McValue lunch, where if you purchase a McDonald's set at that time, you get a cheaper price. So these are all examples of second degree price discrimination. As for third degree price discrimination is when a monopoly or a seller charge different groups of consumer different price. One example which is very that we see very often is cinema, where they charge a different type of people buying the ticket different price based on their characteristics. Like adults are more expensive than students, and also senior citizens. So why do monopoly practice price discrimination? So these are the reasons: higher revenue, which they turn consumer surplus into producer surplus, like I mentioned before in a few slides before. to prompt payment to encourage the people to pay at the given time period. For example, in T, they give you discount when you pay several months at once, so that they are actually encouraging, or they are prompting payment from you guys to pay on time to cover overhead costs. Okay, so for example, like cinemas, if you notice, cinemas, not all the times the movies or the halls are actually fully occupied. Like during office hours or during school time, the halls are actually very empty, but still the cinemas, they still bear the cost of the hall, which causes them to actually bear a very high cost. So in order to cover that cost, cinemas, they charge a lower price at that time to encourage people to watch movies at the less popular time period. Dumping is when, for example, firms uh wants to wants to sabotage a market, they can actually dump the product there by selling the price selling the product at a price which is lower than the cost. So this is what we call dumping, or they can also reap economic of scale. What this means is, if the firms practice price discrimination, they can actually increase their target market, meaning they can sell to more people, or they can sell more goods out to the market. When they sell more goods out to the market, they're actually expanding their scale of production, which means that they can start to enjoy economy of scale. So, just a quick recap on what we've mentioned before. The important characteristics of a monopoly is that it's a large it produced at a large scale. It earns normal profit at least. It practices price discrimination, and there's only one seller. Okay, so these four characteristics will help us to understand the advantages of a monopoly. Okay, so these are the advantages of a monopoly. So monopoly can get economies of scale, meaning they can produce at a lower cost because they are producing at a large scale. They can also do research and development, R&D, because they're earning supernormal profit. What this means is that because they're earning supernormal profit, so the money that they earn, they can actually use it to um, use it and invest it back into the business to fund research and development programs that can help to reduce costs, or even um, create new products. Okay, and they can also do investment, and also create innovation because they have supernormal profit. Same explanation as before. And there are certain industries that can only be operated by a monopoly. Like one example is the postal service. Okay, the reason is because monopoly is a large scale. They operate at a large scale. So certain industry like postal service, which require a lot of assets or a lot of capital, they can only be operated by monopoly. Okay, and the monopoly can also um, serve a larger market. This is because they can do price discrimination. They can charge different prices to different consumer at different time. Okay, and there's no duplication of product or efforts. Like for example, if there's two firms, they are Sony and Apple. What they are doing is, sometimes they do research and development to actually try to find out better software for the phones. But sometimes the research and development, the R&D overlaps each other. They are doing the same R&D, but this cannot be found in the monopoly because there's only one firm, so they will not duplicate the effort of other firms doing the same R&D. Okay, and they also most monopoly also tend to sell at the lower price compared to in a perfect competition or in oligopoly or in any other markets. This may seem contradictory because monopoly, when they have the market power, sometimes you will think that they will use the power to sell at a higher price. But this is not really the case, because remember, monopoly, they have economies of scale, right? So even though they have market power, but the cost of production is much lower compared to perfect competition. Okay, so um for that, we'll have to look at something called the dynamic comparison in order for us to fully understand that. We'll talk about that later in class, on Monday. Okay, so these are the advantages of monopoly. Next is the disadvantage of monopoly. Disadvantages of monopoly. So disadvantages, there are, first of all, monopoly, they are allocatively inefficient. Remember, we discussed in the previous video, allocative efficiency is when price equals to marginal cost. Okay, when the consumer values the last unit of good produced equal to the cost of producing it. Okay, but in the monopoly, this is not the case. Price is not equal to marginal cost, and it is also productively inefficient. It is not producing at its minimum average total cost curve. Okay, and there's unequal distribution of income. What this means is that because monopoly, they tend to earn supernormal profit. So the supernormal profit tends to, what they do is tends to and monopoly, when they earn supernormal profit, monopoly is also mostly owned by rich people. So when there's a monopoly, what may happen is that rich people tends to get more rich and poor people tends to get more poor. So this is one disadvantage of a monopoly. And some government may argue that price discrimination is very unfair. Like, how can we divide people into groups? Like, for example, there's a trend in beer, in pub, is that there is a ladies night which they give cheaper price of they sell beer at a cheaper price to lady. This is, some people may agree that this is not fair. This is sort of a sexist scenario. And also monopoly, they also reduces output, meaning monopoly, because they tend to, they want to sell at higher price, they tend to reduce the output that they sell, so that the price can increase. And six is monopoly lack of incentive, because there's no competitor with the monopoly, so the monopoly do not need to be so there's no incentive for the monopoly to compete with other firms and to try to lower their price. Okay, lastly is there's a limited choice for the consumer. Like, what this means is that, for example, if there's only one firm in the industry and I want to buy something, what happens is that I cannot choose what are the items that I want to buy. There's only one choice for me. There's only one brand for me to buy. So that is what I mean by limited choice. So if you notice, the advantages and disadvantages of a monopoly, sometimes they overlap each other. But remember, economics is not, there's no definite answer for economics. Economics is all about what may happen and what may not happen. So this is very important. Okay. Okay, so lastly, this is the end of this video. So before I finish, because there's actually a lot of things which we don't have time to cover in this video, so if you guys have time, please read up or Google for these few things which are quite important also. So first thing is, how do you control a monopoly? What are the type of interventions that the government can make to control or contain the monopoly? Number two is dynamic comparison of a monopoly and perfect competition. Okay, you can YouTube for this YouTube dynamic comparison of monopoly and you'll find a lot of good videos. And lastly is possible reasons that monopoly continue to operate even though they are making subnormal profit. Okay, so that's all for this video. Thank you.